Curry steps back. Bang!
They do have a timeout. Decide not to use it. Curry.
Way downtown. Bang! Bang! Oh, what a shot from Curry!
Welcome back to Those That Know Me, and welcome to Those That Don't. My name is Jefferson, and this is Step Back Jays. This is my reactions to the NBA draft deadline. Now, I wanted to give myself around 24 hours to truly process the trade deadline. So for me, this is my 24 hours reaction. For you, this could be a little bit over 24 hours or even give it a couple days since the trade deadline. I believe this has been one of the biggest, if not the biggest, trade deadline that we've had in over the last 10 years. And I think it's like by a landslide when you look back at it. We're talking about years where we saw KD, Kyrie leaving a trade deadline. You know, this, I really don't think we've ever seen a trade deadline this drama-filled and this shocking, and so much movement as well too. With that as well too, it lends into what I believe is the theme of this trade deadline, and it's desperation. Very unique when I say desperation now is the teams that I saw made major moves were desperate in very different reasons, right? Some of them were desperate to compete, as in some of them were desperate to begin their tanking process. A lot of the moves carried a lot of risk, but there could be a lot of reward on both sides of it. And that's why I love this trade deadline. Why I love the trade deadline in general, actually, because just the intrigue of moving and this much moving pieces just lends to content like the one I'm creating for you guys right now. I'll break down all of the major moves that we saw. I'll talk about what I loved and what I hated about each one of them. And then I'll go over one of my sleeper deals that I really, really did like. So I'll only be starting with trades that commenced as of the start of last week. And that obviously lends us to the first, which was the Luka trade, or as coined the Luka trade at this point. In February 2nd, Luka Doncic was traded and Maxi Kleber and Markieff Morris to the Lakers, while the Dallas Mavericks got a return back of Anthony Davis, Max Christie, and a 2029 first round pick unprotected by the Lakers. Crazy trade. We all know this. This is an insane trade. I can't believe that we're talking about this. I can't believe when I woke up to see this trade, but I'm going to try to hit it in a different angle than a lot of other individuals that are talking about this trade are discussing. So what I'll say first is what I like. Rob did something. If you're on my channel, you know that I've actually made a video calling out Rob for countlessly missing the mark as a GM and getting the right pieces. But I still stand by this, is that Rob Pelinka had the most impactful year of team construction to lead to the championship in 2020. And this shows signs of that, right? The ability to get back a 26-year-old, a 25-year-old Luka at this time, it's paramount. Honestly, you just can't make up how this trade wind up are coming into fruition. But you had to give kudos to the person that put it together. So I give Rob that kudos, and that's what I really like on one aspect of this. Another aspect is I love this for Luka. Luka gets to build in a big market, and I'm going to try to remove the LeBron James aspect of this because we're talking about a guy that is still or just, honestly entering his prime. And him being able to be in this type of market gives way to potentially him finding and creating his own path. What we've known or what we've seen from European and international players, like they don't typically move around, is what we could see. You have Embiid, he hasn't moved. You've seen Giannis, he's toyed with it. He's talked about it, he hasn't moved. We can go historically. Manu Ginobili didn't move. We can look at it in recent years even further. We look at Jokic, he hasn't moved. This is just a trend that we see, is that typically these European superstars typically stay where they're grounded in. So this bodes well for the Lakers because I know going into this summer they have the impending conversation with the contract extension. Another aspect that I think is big here now on the Dallas side of things is Dallas gets a huge, immense upgrade on the defensive side. As of this moment, Mavs are 12th in defensive rating. And then, you take a look at the other side of it, the Lakers, where Anthony Davis was, they are 8th in defensive rating. So I expect that to be flipped now. Now with AD going alongside with Gafford, and then you can't minimize what Lively is going to bring when he comes back from his injury as well. And then they have very competent wings like Najee Marshall to help out as well. Clay got a little bit left in the tank, not the greatest defender, but at this point or at this stage in his career, but he still has some. And then I love Max Christie in that side also for providing that defensive side. But I also will say beyond the defensive side, he is a promising player that they're adding to this depth. And, in these last 2 games, you can see the instant impact that he's provided for the Mavs since he's joined. Now, what I hated about this trade is for both teams, for me, most people, I am a contrarian by nature. So what I may say, there's people that will not agree with me, and I'm completely fine with that. But I raise these questions anyway. For both teams, it feels like you better have got this right or you might be fucked situation here. No bigger than the Mavs, obviously. You don't get rid of a generational talent unless you're 100% convinced you are, or if not, you're the last 2 teams that is insured to win within that span of time of the player you pick up. So for me, honestly, I would not put that much unneeded pressure on my shoulders with a move like this. And then the vitriol, the anger, the true anger that comes from this right now that sadly Nico Harrison is facing for making such a decision is it's on. He has to weigh that, and he has to consider how he should have been considering how much that is going to impact him and then naturally impact the team as well. So that's another aspect that I didn't really like about that. Now for the Lakers, you better have got this right is, the Lakers, just as much as I said about the European players don't typically move, you still gotta believe and wonder if there's a world where Luka does not commit, you have to have him committed and he has to sign as soon as possible, in my mind. I think if you go into the summer and you don't get him to ink to put that ink on paper, it can just cause the Lakers to sweat a little bit. But I think that is okay because it'll just push Rob Pelinka to do more of his job. And in the last couple of days, he's showing he can still be a competent GM. Now, I'm not going to give him all of the credit and say that because this is Dallas that came with this trade up front of them, and that's how we got here. But I do give him credit for walking back some of the assets so that he can make other moves. So that's what I feel about that trade. Now, the next day, we saw on February 3rd, De'Aaron Fox was finally moved. De'Aaron Fox and Jordan McLaughlin were traded over to the Spurs. You saw Zach LaVine, Seti Sissoko. I'm so sorry for butchering that. And 2 first-round picks and 5 second-round picks to the Kings. And then for the Bulls side of this, they brought in Zach Collins, Trey Jones, Kevin Huerter, and they regained control over their 2025 first-round pick, which previously had a top 10 protection on that pick. What I like about this trade is Fox finally gets a chance to truly go out there and see if he could win. You know, for me personally, I think that the Spurs quietly became a locked-in playoff team in my mind. I don't know who yet I'm taking out of those 6 teams, but actually I think I know. I think that we may see a little bit of slippage for the Clippers. The Clippers in the next couple of weeks, and I think that the Spurs will pick up the pieces and finding themselves in that top 6 because of that. And that's one of the parts that I like about this trade. Spurs also did not have to use a lot of their assets. None more notable than those Atlanta first picks. You know, to go into that trade and get the better player and still retain that type of draft capital, that's a W whenever you get the chance. And it's crazy how it's something that even De'Aaron Fox was talking about before his debut when they played the Hawks, about retaining those picks and still having them. And you know, they could go into this draft and wind up pulling out another impactful player in a already deep draft. So I like that aspect as well. And then for the Bulls, what I really like is the ability to get back your pick, which means no need to fight for the play-in. They already have shown signs of being a mid-level team. There's no reason to overextend these players and try to see if they could keep on continuing towards the goal of making the play-in. I think that their best job now is to get that young talent out there, get guys like Kobe White, who is already playing, but even more reps out there. You get a guy like Matas Bielitsa, get him more reps in there as you know, the season now is kind of a wash, you know. But another aspect that I really do like is that they got to move off of the LaVine contract that is, you know, for the last couple of years they've been wanting to get off of. So that's another aspect that I like. What I hate about this is, you know, the Kings didn't have to do this. They did not have to rush this decision. They did not have to put themselves in this situation yet. And yet they did it. I always think when either if a player is unhappy, disgruntled, whatever word you want to put to it, it's never in your best interest to move out right at that moment. You see how in, ironically, the trade that we talked about before. It looks like the front office was the one that was disgruntled this time, and they wanted to move off, and they did not take their time with this trade. And it seems like a very ill-advised trade. We've seen the other side of that, the opposite of that, where Kevin Durant requested a trade about 2 years ago, and the Nets could have acquiesced it at that moment and gave KD exactly what he was looking for by moving him right at in the off season. But they sat down with him, they reconvened, and then things happened throughout the season. By the time the trade deadline, they got a better package than if they just gave up KD right when once the request came out. So I'm just convinced that the Kings could have got more. They could have looked into getting more. I know that there's always the talk around, once a player is zeroed in on one place, should teams consider it? And I'm all for it. If you're a team and you're trading, you have the asset, to hell with that. You go and you get the best assets you can get. Players always change their mind. They're fickle. They'll follow suit. Look at the situation with PG is a perfect example of that. When he left the Pacers and was traded at OKC. OKC was definitely not on that list, but he wound up signing with OKC after that year. The other aspect of what I hate about this trade is the Bulls' direction. I still don't know which direction the Bulls are going. Although I said it seems like they're heading towards a rebuild, they're going to play younger guys. A lot of the trades they made did not make sense to that, and they retained certain players that make you confused of whether or not they will be doing that. So I just didn't really like that aspect. The next trade that comes to mind is February 5th. Bucks and Wizards decided to make a trade, and they added the Knicks to this one to make it a 3-team trade. And we'll start off with what the Bucks return looks like. Is they receive Kyle Kuzma, Jericho Sims, Patrick Baldwin Jr., and a second-round pick. As for the Wizards, they receive Chris Middleton, AJ Johnson, and a first-round pick swap. And then lastly, the Knicks receive DeLon Wright and some cash. What I like about this trade, I'm going to be real honest with you guys. I don't have a lot that I like about this trade. It really just confuses me, to be honest, in the sense that Kyle Kuzma, I don't know. I don't know for what value he has right now. The game he has shown and the lack of development or maturation in his games over the last year just confuses me about why they did this. But it feels like one of those trades where, it feels like they shook it up for the sake of shaking things up to see if they could find a post. And I just don't like that, because I still trust Middleton as a champion, and I still trust Middleton as, you had to give him some time to rehab to get back to that player. It feels like a Clay situation where we're never gonna be able to see 100% the same player, but I still think what you get out of Middleton as a player is still, in my mind, greater for you on a championship run because of what he was to a team for a championship run than what Kyle Kuzma could bring. What I hate about this trade now, I feel like we'll soon be seeing Chris Middleton somewhere else. It's not going to be this year. We probably won't be seeing much of him the rest of this year, which I think is a good thing. He'll be able to rest up and get the rehab that is needed. Less pressure on now not being on a playoff team to truly impact it. But going into next year, he might be primed to be a buyout candidate. So now the reason why I say that I don't like this is he's got a player option. He's 100% going to take it. I just don't understand why. It was Kyle Kuzma's value that low that you couldn't turn it into something more than just a first round pick swap that may never convey, because we're talking about, will the Wizards get out of this hole before the Bucks? And I just am not convinced of that. All right, well, the next trade of the deadline was the Jimmy Butler trade, the trade that we've been talking about for months. We've been hoping and wishing to see it come to fruition. It finally happened. Jimmy Butler is a warrior. He is a warrior right now, and I got a lot to say, and I'm gonna say it in a little bit, but the breakdown of this trade is that Jimmy Butler, like I said, is the only piece that is moving over to the Warriors at this time in this trade. Andrew Wiggins, Kyle Anderson are two of the pieces that are heading over to the Heat. They also are receiving a 2025 first rounder. I do not remember where it's from, what's the protections around it, but I know it's a 2025 first rounder. They also received PJ Tucker, but he was rerouted, and we'll talk about that later. Dennis Schroeder was traded to the Jazz, but he was rerouted to the Pistons in this trade. And then lastly, Pistons received Landy Waters and Josh Richardson. What I like about this trade is the Pistons, low-key in my mind, got more pieces to build upon. When you look at this roster, they've quietly put together a team that is full of serviceable guys. To add a Landy Waters and a Josh Richardson, obviously to the level of where Josh Richardson is at his career now, you're not going to expect a lot, but this might be a good culture guy in the locker room. Knowing, being a vet, being around in this league this long can be very helpful for this team as they take a run in the playoffs. And honestly, who knows? We may see some very interesting or surprising things happen with this Pistons team. They're looking and they're trying to lock in a top 6 playoff guaranteed spot, and as of right now, it looks like they're firmly in that. It's firmly in their grasp, and these are the type of moves, and these are the type of players. And let me add also, now having Dennis Schroeder as well, these are the type of players that helped you stay in that place. Now, what I hate about this trade, and I'm sorry, actually what I do have something else that I do like about this trade is, although Miami did not get a star in this trade, I think that they got the best type of fit for the Heat culture. Getting a guy like Andrew Wiggins, I don't think that there's any guy in the league that screams more of Heat culture than Andrew Wiggins in my mind. He just fits the mold of what they are and what they're looking for. And they're another team that I say you gotta watch what they're doing and what they're gonna look like in the playoffs because of this. As much as we give Jimmy that credit for what he did, I mean, I will always be someone that appreciated what Jimmy brought to that Miami team in those 5 years. But I also will say that it was great coaching. And now you put Andrew Wiggins, a guy that is an effective two-way player. Man, he, like I said, fits the mold of what Miami Heat are. The Miami Heat are, right? You put him with Eric Spoelstra, I can't wait to see what that looks like and what he winds up becoming for Miami now. As we look at the rest of this year, and like I said, another team to watch for in this playoffs. What do I hate? What I hate is Warriors not letting go of the past. It's really killing them in my mind. The fact is, they held on too long, and they held on too long in several situations. We have the aspect of them running two plans or two directions at a parallel, right? With, going young and trying to rebuild while we're also competing. That was probably the worst idea they could have done. And they did not just pull out of it very fast once they realized it wasn't working. They just continued down that path, and we obviously see what happened. The fact that the fact that they waited till free agency, I think that Clay was already someone they should have looked and seen if they could have moved or if they could have got assets back from. And then also, I think Draymond is due. I'm sorry to say, but Draymond was due to be moved in my mind at this time. He's been such an integral piece of the Warriors, but for them to persist and to continue to innovate and change up what their style was, they needed to remain fresh with moving some of those pieces, and they didn't. And then right now, the reason why I say they're not letting go of the past is simply I'm convinced that the Warriors should have went to having conversations and real dialogue with Steph Curry about where they are. Realistically, we all see it. This is a team that needs a rebuild, and it needs to begin that steps towards a rebuild. I would have had this conversation with Steph, is that this is where we're heading. If he wants to stay along the road for this, we're happy for that, because we'll do whatever you want to do in that sense, right? Because you're a legend, you took that franchise to new heights. It's worth it in that sense. But if he wanted to move, you would acquiesce to where you wanted to go. Class act, you had to repay him back. And that's what I honestly would have done at this point, because they are just so dead in the water at this point, because they just won't move on. And now they're making another, what it seems like, ill-advised decision that's going to haunt them by bringing in a Jimmy Butler at his advanced age. You have Draymond, who's at his advanced age, and then Steph, who's also at his advanced age, still continuing to try to compete, but it just doesn't feel like it feels like each of these players' times has run its course in competing in such that way, right? So that's why I don't like that much about this trade. So I move on to our last biggest trade of the deadline, which is BI finally gets moved, and BI finally gets moved to the Raptors. So Brandon Ingram on February the 5th was traded to the Raptors, and the Raptors sent to the Pelicans Bruce Brown, Kelly Olynyk, a 2025 first rounder, and a future second rounder. As I mentioned, there's a lot that I like and dislike about these trades. So what I like on this aspect for this trade is the Raptors, they're just not a traditional team that sits on its laurels and just tanks. They have solid pieces such as Grady Dick, Scotty Barnes, obviously RJ Barrett, and quickly at this time that that they are playing with or have within their rotation. Now this trade just strengthens that rotation, right? Bringing in a BI not only helps them with still building upon that culture that they're looking to build or remain with, but they also are able to, in a year that, you know, they're not playing their greatest, they're able to bring in someone via the draft, via the lottery, that will help out this rebuild, but they're also able to continue on with this culture that they're building with their new coach. Not that new coach, but with their coach at the helm. What I hate about this trade is, similar to the Bulls, still no clear direction on what the Pelicans are doing in the short term, and then I gotta argue also in the long term. There's too much questions around this team in my mind. When a team is filled with this much questions, I just expect a trade at that point. It feels like we're destined to see over the summer a trade that maybe will co-sign that they're fully leaning into this rebuild, but it's funny for me because, you know, they briefly got out of a rebuild when they got Zion to then just, you know, start up another rebuild, and it's so sad when you look at these smaller markets that can't seem to get strike when the iron's hot to get the right pieces and then make that daring trade that possibly puts it all together. But my heart like aches for real Pelicans fans that had to go through this last 5 to 6 years and watch it potentially another rebuild. So I lied about the last big trade. This actually was the last one, and it was also on February 5th. Mark Williams of the Hornets is finally getting moved, and he's getting moved over in a shocking trade actually to the Lakers. What's more shocking is what the Lakers sent over to the Hornets. Dalton Connect, Cam Reddish, a 2031 first round pick, and a 2030 pick swap with the Lakers. Obviously, a lot to unpack on that trade, and what I like about it is that it's another one of those trades. Like I said, you know, the theme of this trade deadline was desperation. This speaks to that. This is another one of those risk-reward type of style deals for the Lakers in my mind. If they got this right, and if they strike right on this, Mark Williams clearly could fit into the role of what Derek Lively was for Luka in Dallas. And if you're able to get that, I mean, this team, it takes them to another level. It takes precisely the Lakers to another level, and ultimately, you know, is contender status for them this year. I won't go too far to say all of that, but I think it does ascend them into a very, very interesting part of teams, or a group of teams in the West that has the capability of going to the finals. From there, what I also like, I really like this. I probably will go up to the point of saying I love this aspect. Is that the Hornets strengthens their draft capital but also gets a promising young guy. You know, being able to bring in Dalton at this time allows them to take the pressure off Dalton's shoulders a little bit, you know, and allows for him to get the time to grow outside of the immense public eye that he was facing while being a Laker, you know, and truly see what he develops into, you know, and this rebuild's starting to look very, very good for the Hornets when you look at it, you know. If LaMelo can stay healthy, that's always the biggest if. You have LaMelo, you have Brandon Miller, and now you're looking at Dalton Connect. This is a surefire. Set of wings, and I think Dalton fits more into that 2 guard more than he does as a wing. But I'm gonna say wings, and then a lead guard. And LaMelo as well. They're looking very, very good. They have the lottery coming up as well. And then, like I said, they bolstered some of their picks just to position themselves, to be an interesting team moving forward. What I hate about this trade is Mark Williams just has never been a guy since he's joined the league that has played consistently. It's not that he's not being put on the court. It's actually that he's just not available. He's not available, and this is making it hard to truly assess what his talent is in the league long term, right? We've seen him as a rim runner in his time on the Hornets, but is there limitations to that? There's a lot of talk about his standing jump, his 9 foot 9 inches wingspan. Is a lot of the conversations that are happening right now, but that has nothing to do with what we project him to wind up being. It's just kind of hard to assess what he's going to become, because as we've seen in the past, it's very hard for players at times to make that jump from being on a mediocre team to a potential contender. And all players handle it differently. We've seen some players really embrace that role, that jump or that change. And like players like Iman Shumpert is a perfect example. Leaving the Knicks to then go over to the Cavs later in his career showed how impactful he could be on that team. Another player in that sense, a teammate of his as well as J.R. Smith, that showed making that jump from mediocre team over into potential contender, or a contender in that sense. When they came over to the Cavs, the 2 guys that really, it was impactful for them. But then we've seen it going the other way, right? Jordan Clarkson was a perfect example of that, going from being I believe at the time he was a Laker, and then he made that jump over to the Cavs, and it was exposed that the player that we saw him as a Lakers just did not translate to being on that Cavs team. So, it's only time could tell with that one. And then the other aspect that I hate about this trade is, you get rid of Dalton Connect. To me, it's flat out dumb to me personally. The fact that you were able to not have him included in that AD trade, that just confirmed for me more that you should not have moved off of him. But what it also does confirm to me is that the Lakers are not in the business to always have players, that they have to develop. They're not looking to spend the time to develop these players. It feels as to me that they'd rather move on from those type of promising players for players that could be instant contributors. Now, the problem that I have with this is that this might be the one of the times that you don't know 100% if they got that right, because only time will tell us if Mark Williams could truly transition into, being that player that he's been for the last month for the Hornets. Can that transition to who he could be for the Lakers? All right, so now for my sleeper picks, I have an honorable mention, and then I'll go into the actual sleeper pick that I have. And that honorable mention is the trade that sent Davion Mitchell to the Heat for PJ Tucker and a future second round pick with cast considerations. I talked about this earlier about how Andrew Wiggins screams heat culture. I think that Davion Mitchell is another one of those players that screams heat culture. I love this move for Miami. You know, you get another guy that just really fits the mold. And then the beauty of that in my mind too is that this is someone you don't, if it doesn't work out, it's okay. It's worth the flyer. You're not moving crazy assets to that for this, but if it pans out, this is a perfect rotation piece to have on this Miami Heat team. All right, and now my sleeper pick. This trade actually came down very, very close to the twilight of the trade deadline, and you know, rarely do you see like a move like this happen and it goes by the wayside. But you know, due to the circumstances of the trade deadline, you know, you see why it happened this way. So that trade is the Atlanta Hawks trading for DeAndre Hunter, sending him out to the Cavs for Karis LeVert, George Niang, and 3 second rounders and 2 swaps. You know, this trade, like I said, is a sleeper for me because of the dynamic player that Cleveland is bringing back in this trade. The Cavs as of right now, as of February 7th, have the best defense in the league with a defensive rating of 111.5. Right? They bring in a guy that can truly buy in. That I think you can truly get him to buy into the system. And then he also has the physical features to expand on his own personal defensive rating. Not necessarily the highest defensive rating, I'll say that as well. But he's having his best year right now. He's averaging around 19 points per game as of right now, and is shooting nearly 40% from 3. But what I love the most is he's a guy that understands and assumes his role really well. The other day I was watching on TNT and Brian Andrews, Andrews. I'm sorry if I'm butchering the last name. Mentioned a few weeks ago that Hunter spoke to him about coming off the bench. And he was mentioning how it has become like a pro for him. Him being given more time to, analyze the teams in those first 5 to 6 minutes, and then integrate himself into the game in that way, right? To see where he could pick up on and truly impact the game. Not a lot of players in the league first embraces that role, let alone do they embrace that at his age and at this stage in the league. So for me personally, that is a massive W for the Cavs to be bringing in someone like this that seems very coachable. And because of that, I just can't wait to see Kenny Atkinson coach up a player that's like this. So that is my review over the trade deadline. I wanted to do it a little bit different. Everybody's going to give you their winners and losers of the deadline, but I just wanted to give you some honest thoughts, some reactions lacking the knee jerk, about how I felt and process each one of these and truly give you a non-emotional response to these trades. It was a very impactful trade deadline. I can't wait till we see how these play out for the remainder of the season. And, stay tuned for our next fourth quarter report where we talk over some of the things that happened in the past month, talk about what's going on. And, for the remainder of this year, looking forward to continue to provide impactful content just like this. And if you really did enjoy this, please, it don't hurt to hit that like or subscribe button. And if you don't, it's okay. But if you do, I appreciate you. Peace.